Hello everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the stories. My name is David Thornton, and I used to be a firefighter. Used to be a lot of things, actually. Used to sleep at night. Used to look at myself in the mirror without seeing ghosts. Used to believe I could save everyone. That was before the fire. Before I failed 5 people who trusted me to keep them safe. Now I'm a park ranger in the Apache National Forest in Arizona. People think I came here for the quiet, for the peace. They're wrong. I came here because deserts don't burn, or at least they're not supposed to. It was early morning when I first noticed something was wrong. Really wrong. I was walking my usual patrol route, watching the sun come up over the mountains. Except the sun wasn't coming up over the mountains. It was coming up from under the ground, like the earth itself was glowing from below. I stopped walking and rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, the sun was where it should be, hanging in the eastern sky like it always did. But my skin still felt warm from underneath, like I was standing over a giant oven. I kept walking, trying to shake off the weird feeling. The desert was quiet, which I usually loved. No sirens, no screaming, no crackling flames eating everything in their path. Just my boots on the sand and rocks. Except today, every time my foot hit the ground, I heard an echo. Not from the rocks around me, but from somewhere above, like someone was walking in the empty sky, copying every step I took. I looked up. Nothing but blue sky and a few clouds. I stopped walking. The echo stopped too. I took one step. One echo. In from above. My hands started shaking. I pulled out my water bottle and took a long drink, trying to calm down. The water tasted wrong. Metallic, like I was drinking liquid pennies mixed with something bitter and afraid. I spit it out and checked the bottle. It looked normal, clear plastic with normal water inside, but it still tasted like metal and fear. That's when I saw the roadrunner. It was about 20 feet away, running full speed like they always do. Then it just stopped. Not like it saw something or got tired. It stopped like someone hit a pause button. The bird stood perfectly still for 10 whole minutes. I counted. 10 minutes of nothing, not even blinking. Then it started running backward. Same speed, same path, but in reverse. Like someone was playing a movie backward. I'd seen a lot of weird things in my life, but never anything like that. I got back to the ranger station around noon and checked my messages. 3 more livestock reports had come in overnight. That made 12 dead animals in 2 weeks. The ranchers were getting scared, and I didn't blame them. Their cattle and sheep weren't just dying. They were being torn apart by something with claws bigger than anything that lived in these mountains. But the weird part wasn't the claws. It was the blood. Mrs. Garcia from the Double R Ranch called me crying yesterday. She said her prize bull wasn't bleeding normal blood. She said it was bleeding light, actual light, like liquid sunshine pouring out of the wounds. I thought she was in shock, seeing things that weren't there. But then Mr. Peterson called with the same story. And then the Johnsons. 3 different ranchers, all saying their animals bled light instead of blood. I drove out to check the latest kill that afternoon. The wind was blowing from the north, carrying the smell of the Nevada desert toward us. But it didn't smell like desert. It smelled like ozone, that sharp electric smell you get right before lightning strikes, mixed with something else. Something that reminded me of the house fire, of burning hair and melted plastic. The smell made my stomach turn. When I got to the kill site, I found something that made everything worse. The saguaro cacti, those giant desert trees with arms that point in all directions, were all leaning the same way. Every single one was tilted away from something, like they were trying to get as far away as possible from an invisible danger. Their arms all pointed in the same direction, toward the mountains that separated us from Nevada. I'd never seen cacti do that before. I tried to whistle while I worked, taking pictures and measurements of the dead cow. Whistling always helped me think, but when the sound came out of my mouth, it didn't sound like whistling. It sounded like screaming, and it wasn't coming from me. It was coming from somewhere underground, like there were caverns full of terrified voices beneath my feet. I stopped whistling real quick. The cow had claw marks just like the others, but these were different. The wounds weren't just deep, they were burned. The edges were black and crispy, like something radioactive had touched them. I pulled out my Geiger counter, the one I'd carried since my firefighting days for checking radiation at industrial fires. Click, click, click. The background radiation was 3 times higher than normal. Not dangerous yet, but way higher than it should be in the middle of nowhere, Arizona. I was getting ready to leave when I found the stone. It was half buried near the dead cow, covered in symbols that looked old, really old. I brushed off the dirt and saw words carved in English underneath the symbols. Someone had translated them. When earth blood glows, shadow walkers hunt in bright time. My hands were shaking again as I read it. Earth blood glowing. That sounded like radiation. And if shadow walkers were what I thought they were, something that hunts in bright time meant something that hunts during the day, something invisible that hunts when the sun is up. I looked around the empty desert, suddenly feeling like I was being watched. The sun was bright overhead, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, something I couldn't see, something that could see me just fine. I got back in my truck and drove toward town, but I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The backward sun, the echoing footsteps, the roadrunner, the bleeding light, the leaning cacti, the underground screaming, and my blue eyes in the rearview mirror, looking tired and scared. Eyes that had seen too much smoke, too much failure. Eyes that had watched 5 people die because I wasn't fast enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't good enough. I carried a melted toy car in my pocket, a little red Corvette that belonged to Tommy, the youngest kid in that house fire. 5 years old with his whole life ahead of him. I'd found it in the hallway outside his room, the room I never made it to. The plastic was twisted and black, but I could still tell what it used to be. I carried it everywhere now, a reminder of what happens when I fail. But this felt different. This felt bigger than one house, one family. This felt like something that could hurt a lot more people if I didn't figure it out. And maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to be the hero I'd failed to be before. Even if I had no idea what I was up against, even if it was something I couldn't see, even if it was something that shouldn't exist. The attacks got worse over the next 3 days. I woke up Tuesday morning to my radio crackling with panic. Jenkins Ranch lost 4 sheep overnight, not killed, taken apart, like something had studied each animal, figuring out exactly how to tear them into perfect pieces. I drove out there with my coffee still hot in the thermos. Mrs. Jenkins met me at the gate, her face white as paper. "It wasn't natural, David," she whispered. "The pieces were arranged in a pattern, like something was trying to tell us something." She was right. The sheep parts were laid out in a perfect circle, each piece exactly the same distance from the center. And in the middle of the circle, burned into the dirt, was a shape I'd never seen before. It looked like lightning, but upside down, branching into the ground instead of across the sky. My Geiger counter went crazy when I held it over the burn. Mark, click, 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 click. The radiation was 10 times normal. Whatever made this mark was hot, real hot. "Mrs. Jenkins," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you need to keep your family inside for a few days. Don't let the kids play outside." "Why? What's out there, David?" I looked at the perfect circle of sheep parts, at the upside-down lightning burned into the earth, at my Geiger counter still clicking like an angry insect. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." That afternoon, I drove to the county library in town. If something weird was happening in the desert, maybe it had happened before. Maybe someone had written it down. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, helped me find the old newspaper files. We went back 50 years, looking for strange animal deaths, weird sightings, anything that didn't make sense. We found plenty. 1952, mysterious light seen over Apache forest. Local tribes refused to comment. 1961, rancher reports cattle turned inside out. Sheriff calls it mountain lion attack. 1967, strange sounds underground. Geologist says no cave systems in area. 1973, missing hikers found dead. Bodies show unusual burn patterns every 7 to 10 years. Something happened. Something the newspapers couldn't explain. Something the police blamed on wild animals or accidents. But the details were always wrong. Burns that looked like radiation. Missing time. Animals torn apart in ways that didn't match any known predator. And it all started in 1951, right after the government began nuclear testing in Nevada. Mrs. Chen, I said, my voice quiet in the library's silence. Do you have any maps showing the underground nuclear tests from the Nevada test site? She looked at me strangely. That's classified information, David. Why would you need something like that? I showed her the newspaper clippings spread across the table. Because I think something got loose. It took her an hour, but she found what I needed. Not official maps, but environmental reports, scientific. Papers, studies about radiation, drift, and underground water contamination. Hidden in all the technical language, I found what I was looking for. The Nevada test site had conducted underground nuclear explosions for 30 years. Some of them were so deep and so powerful that they cracked the Earth's foundation. The reports called them geological fractures and dimensional instabilities. I called them doorways. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on my porch with a beer and my father's old hunting rifle, watching the desert under the moonlight. Everything looked normal, quiet, peaceful, but my skin felt like ants were crawling all over it. Around midnight, I heard it. A sound so low I felt it more than heard it. It made my chest vibrate and my teeth ache. It made every part of my brain scream, "Run!" even though I couldn't see any danger. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere, like the desert itself was growling. I grabbed my flashlight and my rifle and walked toward the sound. My feet felt heavy, like my body was fighting against going forward, but I kept walking. I had to know. The sound led me to a clearing about half a mile from my cabin. The same clearing where I'd found that first dead cow. But now, in the moonlight, I could see something else. Heat shimmer. You know how air looks wavy over hot pavement in summer? That's what I was seeing, except it was midnight and the desert was cold. The shimmer was moving, walking back and forth like it was pacing, like it was thinking. I raised my rifle and pointed it at the shimmer. "I can see you," I called out. The shimmer stopped moving, then it turned toward me. I've been scared before. I've run into burning buildings, faced down drug dealers, stared at flames that wanted to eat me alive. But I've never felt fear like this. This was the kind of fear that makes you forget how to breathe, how to think, how to be human. The shimmer started walking toward me. I fired 3 shots right at the center of it. The bullets passed right through like it wasn't there, but the shimmer stopped walking. It tilted its head like it was curious about what I'd just done. Then I heard it laugh. Not with its mouth. It didn't have a mouth I could see. The laugh came from inside my head, cold and sharp like broken glass. It was the sound of something that thought humans were funny little toys. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran back to my cabin and locked every door and window. I sat in my kitchen with my rifle and waited for dawn, listening to that thing walk around outside my house. It never tried to get in. It just walked in circles until the sun came up. Then the footsteps stopped. The next morning I found tracks in the dirt around my cabin. Not paw prints or boot marks. These looked like radiation burns in the shape of feet. Each print glowed faintly green when I held my Geiger counter over it. That's when I knew I was dealing with something that shouldn't exist in our world. But it was here anyway. I spent the morning making phone calls, first to my old fire chief in Phoenix, asking about radiation suits and detection equipment. Then to a buddy who worked construction, asking about explosives. Then to my insurance company, making sure my policy was paid up. Because I was starting to form a plan, a stupid, dangerous plan that would probably get me killed. But maybe, if I was lucky, it would also get rid of this thing before it killed anyone else. I'd failed to save 5 people once. I wouldn't let it happen again. That afternoon, I drove to the hardware store and bought everything I could carry: batteries, wire, timers, propane tanks, road flares. The clerk asked if I was planning a big barbecue. Something like that, I told him. I also stopped by the fire station and borrowed some gear. My old radiation suit, the kind we used for industrial accidents, a helmet with infrared sensors, emergency oxygen tanks. If this thing was made of radiation and heat, maybe I could fight it with fire. Maybe I could finally be the hero I'd tried to be that night 5 years ago. The night when everything went wrong. The night I became a failure instead of a savior. But this time would be different. This time I knew what I was up against. This time I was ready to die trying. I had 3 days to get ready. 3 days to figure out how to kill something I couldn't see, something that laughed at bullets, something that fed on the same radiation that was slowly poisoning the desert. I spent those days like a man preparing for war, because that's what it was. A war between something that shouldn't exist and someone who'd already lost everything that mattered. On Thursday morning, I drove back to the clearing where I'd first seen the heat shimmer. In daylight, with my infrared helmet on, could see it clearly for the first time. It was huge, 9 feet tall, with arms longer than a man's body and claws that looked like they were made of solid light. Its skin shimmered like oil on water, constantly shifting between visible and invisible. When it moved, reality seemed to bend around. Like it was too big for our world. But the worst part was its face. It didn't have eyes, but I could feel it watching me. It didn't have a mouth, but I could hear it laughing inside my head. It looked like someone had tried to build a person, but forgot what people were supposed to look like. Through the infrared sensors, I watched it hunt. It would stand perfectly still for hours, waiting for animals to come close. When a rabbit or a bird got within reach, the creature would grab it with those light claws and tear it apart slowly, like it was studying how life worked. Then it would arrange the pieces in those perfect circles, those upside-down lightning patterns burned into the earth. It was learning, getting stronger. Each kill made it more solid, more real, and it was getting ready for something bigger. That night I set my trap. I drove to the clearing and unloaded everything from my truck. Propane tanks connected to timers, road flares wired to motion sensors, a radiation suit rigged with explosives that would go off if my heart stopped beating. If this thing wanted to kill me, it was going to pay a price. I put on the radiation suit and helmet, checked my oxygen tanks, and walked to the center of the clearing. Then I sat down on the ground and waited. The creature showed up around midnight, just like I knew it would. At first, it was just heat. Shimmer again, pacing around me in a wide circle, testing, thinking. It had learned to be careful around humans who could see it. But I wasn't running this time. I wasn't even moving. "Come on," I said out loud. "I'm right here. Come and get me." The shimmer stopped pacing. Through my helmet's infrared sensors, I watched it tilt its head, studying me like I was a puzzle it couldn't solve. Then it started walking toward me. Each step made the ground shake. Each step made my Geiger counter click faster and faster until it sounded like rain on a tin roof. The radiation was so intense that even through my suit I could feel my skin starting to burn. When it got close enough, the creature became fully visible, not just heat shimmer anymore, but solid and real and terrifying. Its claws glowed like they were made of pure energy. Its skin rippled with colors that hurt to look at, and its face... God, its face was the worst thing I'd ever seen. It was trying to look human, but it got everything wrong. Too many teeth, eyes in places eyes shouldn't be, skin that moved like it was alive. "You see me now," it said without speaking, its voice echoing inside my skull. "You see what your kind has made possible." "I see a monster," I said back. "I am what crawled through the cracks your weapons made in reality. I am what feeds on the poison you bury in the earth. I am the shadow your atomic fire cast into other worlds." The creature reached down with one massive claw and touched my helmet. Where it touched, the metal began to melt. "Your kind opened the doors between worlds. Now we come through to hunt in your bright time, to feast on your fear, to learn your weaknesses." "Why?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I didn't want to know the answer. "Because soon there will be enough of us. Soon we will not need to hide. Soon your species will feed us forever." That's when I understood. This wasn't just one creature. It was a scout, a soldier sent ahead to test our defenses, to see how easy we'd be to hunt. And we were failing the test. "How many of you are there?" I asked. The creature's laugh felt like ice water in my veins. "How many nuclear tests did your kind detonate? How many cracks did you make in the walls between worlds? We are legion, human. We are patient. We are hungry." It raised its other claw, ready to tear me apart like all the animals before me. But I was ready too. "Then I guess I better close some of those cracks," I said. I triggered the first set of explosives. The propane tanks exploded in a ring around us, creating a wall of fire that reached toward the sky. The creature shrieked, a sound like metal tearing apart, and stumbled backward. Fire was still fire, even to something from another dimension, but it wasn't enough to kill it, just enough to hurt it, to make it angry. "Clever," it hissed. "But fire cannot destroy what exists between light and shadow." "Maybe not," I said, "but radiation can." I triggered the second set of explosives, the ones connected to the radioactive material I'd been collecting for 3 days. Medical waste from the hospital, smoke detectors with americium cores, fertilizer with uranium traces. When those exploded, the clearing lit up like a small sun. My Geiger counter screamed so loud I thought it might break. The radiation was enough to kill 12 men. But this creature ate radiation, fed on it, grew stronger from it. For a moment I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Then I saw what the explosion had really done. The blast hadn't hurt the creature. It had forced it to become completely solid. No more shimmering, no more fading in and out of our world. The radiation had anchored it to our reality. Now it could be hurt. Now it could be killed. Now it was trapped here with me. "You fool," the creature snarled. "You have only made me stronger." "No," I said, getting to my feet. "I've made you solid, and solid things can burn." I pulled out Tommy's melted toy car, the one I'd carried for 5 years. The plastic was already twisted and black from the house fire, but now, in the radioactive air, it was starting to glow. The creature looked at the toy car and, for the first time, seemed afraid. "What is that?" "It's guilt," I said. "It's failure. It's the weight of everyone you couldn't save." I held the car up so the creature could see it clearly. "And it's radioactive as hell." The toy car had been soaking up radiation for 5 years, ever since I started carrying it. All those industrial fires, all those contaminated sites, all that background radiation from living near the nuclear testing zone. The plastic had absorbed it all, concentrated it, turned it into something that shouldn't exist. Just like a creature, I threw the car at the monster's chest. When it hit, the car melted right through its skin, like acid through paper. The creature screamed and clawed at the wound, but the radioactive plastic kept burning deeper and deeper. "This is for the families I couldn't save," I said. Then I triggered the final explosive, the one built into my radiation suit. The blast. threw me 20 feet through the air and cracked 3 of my ribs. But it also tore the creature in half, sending pieces of it flying across the burning clearing. I lay on my back, watching the fire consume everything. My radiation suit was shredded. My helmet was cracked, and my oxygen was running out. But the creature was dead, or so I thought. As I watched, the pieces started moving, crawling toward each other, trying to put themselves back together. "You cannot kill what exists in many dimensions," the creature whispered, its voice weaker but still there. "You can only delay us." "Maybe," I said, coughing up blood, "but I can make sure everyone knows you're coming." I reached for my radio with shaking hands and switched it to the emergency frequency. Every ranger station, every police department, every military base in the Southwest would hear this. "This is Ranger David Thornton, Apache National Forest," I said into the radio. "Code Red. Repeat, Code Red. Unknown hostile entities are using nuclear test sites as dimensional gateways. They're invisible to normal sight, but show up on infrared. They feed on radiation and fear. They're scouts for an invasion force." I coughed, again tasting copper and radiation sickness. They can be hurt when forced into solid form with concentrated radiation exposure. Fire works, explosives work, but you have to make them solid first. My vision was getting blurry. They're coming through the cracks we made in reality, all those nuclear tests. We opened doors we can't close. The radio crackled with confused voices asking for clarification, asking if this was some kind of joke. "It's not a joke," I whispered. "They're real, they're here, and there are more coming." I looked at the creature's pieces, still trying to crawl back together in the dying firelight. "But now you know," I said to it. "Now my people know what you are. The element of surprise is gone." The creature's laugh was weaker now, but still cold. "One human's warning against a legion of shadow walkers. Your species will not believe. Your leaders will cover this up. We will adapt and return and feast." "Maybe," I said, "but you'll have to do it without me stopping you." My heart was slowing down. The radiation was eating me from the inside out, but I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in 5 years, I'd saved someone. Maybe I'd saved everyone. The toy car had melted completely into the creature's chest, and both were slowly dissolving into radioactive ash that glowed green in the darkness. As I died, I thought I heard something. Voices calling from far away, from other dimensions, other realities. The creature's death scream had carried across the spaces between worlds, alerting other shadow walkers that Earth had humans willing to die to protect their own. Maybe that would make them think twice about invading. Or maybe it would make them want us even more. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I'd done what I came here to do. I'd been the hero I couldn't be 5 years ago. I'd saved the people I couldn't save before. And as the stars faded above me, I finally understood the cosmic joke. My failure as a firefighter had prepared me for this moment. All that guilt, all that radiation exposure, all that knowledge of how fire and destruction worked, it had all been training for a war I never knew was coming. The Shadow Walkers thought they were hunting us. They didn't realize they were teaching us how to fight back. My name was David Thornton. I used to be a firefighter. I died a soldier in a war most people will never know happened. But I died protecting everyone I couldn't protect before. And sometimes that's enough. 3 days later, they found my body. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened after I died, because someone needs to know the whole truth. The explosion lit up the night sky for 50 miles. People in 4 different towns called 911, reporting a nuclear blast in the Apache National Forest. The fire department, police, and National Guard all showed up within an hour, but they weren't the first ones there. Agent Sarah Martinez from the Department of Energy arrived before the flames even died down. She'd been monitoring radiation levels across the Southwest for 15 years, ever since taking a job most people don't know exists. Her job was to watch for exactly what had just happened. she found my body in the center of a glass crater. The sand had melted from the heat and radiation, creating a perfect circle of green glass that glowed in the dark. My radio was still clutched in my dead hand, still broadcasting on the emergency frequency. But Sarah found something else too. Scattered around the crater were pieces of something that shouldn't exist, chunks of what looked like living metal, still twitching and trying to crawl toward each other. When she held her radiation detector over them, it screamed so loud she had to turn it off. What the hell happened? Here? Asked Sheriff Peterson, the first local official to reach the scene. Sarah looked at the crater, at my body, at the pieces of impossible flesh still moving in the sand. She'd read reports like this before, classified reports, reports that officially didn't exist. Gas leak explosion, she told the sheriff. Propane tanks in the ranger's truck, nothing more. But she knew better. And more importantly, she'd heard my radio transmission, every word of it. While the local authorities cleaned up what they thought was an accident, Sarah quietly collected the creature's remains. She sealed them in lead containers and had them shipped to a facility in Nevada that didn't appear on any maps. The official report listed my death as accidental explosion during routine patrol. The newspaper ran a small story about a dedicated ranger who died in the line of duty. My funeral had 12 people, but Sarah's report was different. Her report went to people with security clearances higher than the president's, people who'd been waiting for something like this to happen, because I wasn't the first person to fight one of these things. The creatures had been coming through for decades, ever since the first nuclear test in 1945. Most of the time they stayed hidden, hunting animals and the occasional hiker. The government had a whole department dedicated to covering up their kills, explaining away the impossible. But what I'd done was different. I'd forced one to become solid. I'd killed it, and I'd broadcast the method to every law enforcement agency in the Southwest. That changed everything. 2 weeks after my death, Sarah got a phone call that would change her life. Agent Martinez, this is General Morrison, Project Blackwood. We need to talk. Project Blackwood was the government's response to the interdimensional threat. A small group of scientists, soldiers, and agents who knew the truth about what was crawling through the cracks in reality. Sarah found herself sitting in a windowless room in Washington, D.C., looking at photos that made her stomach turn. Cattle torn apart in perfect geometric patterns, missing hikers found arranged in impossible positions, burn marks that looked like they came from another dimension. Ranger Thornton's method works, General Morrison told her. We've tested it on 3 separate incidents. Concentrated radiation exposure forces them into our reality, making them vulnerable to conventional weapons. How many are there? Sarah asked. We don't know, but they're getting bolder. The attacks are increasing, and thanks to Thornton's radio broadcast, some local law enforcement agencies are starting to ask questions. Sarah studied the photos, spread across the table. Each one showed the same thing, evidence of creatures that shouldn't exist, hunting in a world that refused to believe in them. What do you want me to do? We're forming response teams, people who can identify these things, track them, and eliminate them using Thornton's method. You'd be in charge of the Southwest region. Sarah thought about the green glass crater, about my body surrounded by the remains of something impossible, about the radio transmission that had revealed humanity's new war to anyone who cared to listen. What's the success rate, General? Morrison's face was grim. 80% of our people don't survive their first encounter, but the ones who do, they become very good at this job very quickly. Sarah signed up anyway, because someone had to fight the war that most people would never know existed. 6 months later, she got her first call. A ranch outside of Tucson was reporting animals. A bleeding light. The patterns matched everything in her files. Sarah loaded her truck with radiation equipment, explosives, and a modified flamethrower that could concentrate radioactive material into a focused beam. She wore a radiation suit identical to the one I'd died in, and she carried a melted toy car that had belonged to her younger brother, killed in a car accident 5 years earlier. Every agent carried something like that now. Something personal, something radioactive, something that reminded them why they fought. They called them Thornton charges after me. Sarah found the creature 2 days later, invisible except for the heat shimmer that gave it away. She followed my method exactly. Force it solid with concentrated radiation, then hit it with everything she had. The fight lasted 3 minutes. When it was over, both Sarah and the creature were dead. But before she died, Sarah managed to send out the same radio transmission I had. The same warning, the same instructions, the same desperate hope that someone would listen, and someone always did. The war I started in that burning clearing continues. Every few months, another agent dies fighting something that shouldn't exist. Every few months, another radio transmission goes out, adding to the knowledge, improving the methods, keeping the secret alive. The creatures are still coming through the cracks we made in reality. But now, we know how to fight them. Now, we know they can be killed. My name was David Thornton. I used to be a firefighter. I died a soldier in a war most people will never know happened. But I wasn't the last soldier, and I won't be the last to die protecting a world that doesn't know it needs protecting. The invisible war continues, and somewhere out there, another person is loading their truck with radiation equipment and explosives, carrying their own melted toy, ready to face something that shouldn't exist. Ready to be a hero when heroism means dying alone in the desert, fighting monsters that officially don't exist. Ready to send out one more radio transmission before the end. Ready to make sure the war continues, one death at a time. Because that's what heroes do, even the invisible ones. My name is Jim Fletcher, and I'm 41 years old. Every morning I wake up in an apartment that feels too big for one person. The coffee maker still makes 2 cups because I keep forgetting to change it. Margaret used to drink the second cup. She used to sit at the kitchen table in her blue robe, reading the news on her phone while I got ready for work. But Margaret doesn't live here anymore. She left 3 months ago, packed her things while I was at work and left a note on the refrigerator. I can't do this anymore, Jim. You care more about saving strangers than saving us. The note is still there. I read it every morning while I drink both cups of coffee. I keep my wedding ring in my front pocket. Not because I think she's coming back, but because throwing it away feels like giving up on everything we had. Sometimes I roll it between my fingers during the day. It's warm from my body heat, and for just a second, I can pretend things are normal. I used to be a paramedic. For 15 years, I drove that ambulance through the worst parts of people's days. Heart attacks, car crashes, overdoses. I was good at it too. Really good. My partner Jake used to say I could bring someone back from the dead just by talking to them. Maybe that was the problem. Every time someone died on my watch, I took it home with me. Margaret would find me sitting on the couch at 3 in the morning, staring at nothing. You can't save everyone, she'd say. But I kept trying. I worked double shifts, took extra calls, anything to feel useful, to feel needed. The irony is that while I was busy saving everyone else, I couldn't save my own marriage. After Margaret left, I couldn't do the paramedic job anymore. Every emergency reminded me of how I'd failed the one person who mattered most. So I quit and took a job as a forest ranger. Trees don't have heart attacks. Animals don't overdose. It seemed safer. Today is my first day working at Freetown Fall River State Forest in Massachusetts. It's a big place, full of hiking trails and camping spots. The kind of place where families come to get away from the city. The kind of place I might have brought Margaret if I'd made time for things like that. My supervisor, Carl, is a friendly guy with a grey beard. He shows me around the ranger station and hands me my uniform. Pretty quiet job, he says. Most days you'll just walk the trails, check on campers, make sure nobody's starting fires where they shouldn't. It sounds perfect, peaceful. No emergencies, no life or death decisions. I drive my Park Service truck to the main trail entrance. The forest is beautiful in the morning light. Tall pine trees stretch up toward the sky, and I can hear birds singing somewhere in the distance. For the first time in months, I feel like maybe I can breathe again. I start walking down the main trail. My boots crunch on fallen leaves. The air smells fresh and clean, not like the antiseptic smell of hospitals or the exhaust fumes from the city. This is good. This is what I need. But after walking for about 10 minutes, I notice something strange. My shadow on the ground looks wrong. Instead of falling away from me like shadows should, it seems to be bending toward me, like it's trying to reach for my feet. I stop walking and look around. All the tree shadows are doing the same thing. They're all pointing toward me instead of away from the sun. That's not how shadows work. That's not how anything works. I shake my head and keep walking. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe the stress of the divorce and the new job is making me see things. But as I walk deeper into the forest, I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me. Something that shouldn't be there. The trees here are beautiful, but they're too perfect, too organized. They grow in straight lines and perfect circles, like someone planted them with a ruler and compass. Real forests don't look like this. Real forests are messy and random. I pull out my phone to call Carl and ask about it, but there's no signal. The screen shows 0 bars. That's weird too. The ranger station isn't that far away. I keep walking, trying to convince myself that everything is normal, that starting over in a new place is just going to take some getting used to. But Margaret's voice keeps echoing in my head. You care more about saving strangers than saving us. Maybe if I'd listened to her. Maybe if I'd come home on time instead of working those extra shifts. Maybe if I'd talked to her instead of carrying all that weight by myself. But it's too late for maybes now. All I have left is this job, this forest, and the wedding ring in my pocket that gets heavier every day. As I walk deeper into the trees, I don't know that I'm being watched by something that feeds on exactly what I'm feeling right now. Something that's been waiting for someone like me. Someone broken enough to be hungry for any kind of connection, even the wrong kind. The deeper I walk into the forest, the quieter it gets. Too quiet. Back in the city, there's always noise. Cars, people, sirens. Here the silence feels thick, like it's pressing against my ears. My footsteps sound different too. Each step echoes, but not the way it should. When I step with my left foot, I hear it. Then I hear it again a second later, then again. Like my footsteps are bouncing back to me in a pattern. Step, 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 step. I stop walking to test it. The echoes keep going for a few more seconds, then fade away. That's not normal. Echoes don't work like that in a forest full of trees. I start walking again, paying close attention. My right foot hits the ground once, my left foot hits twice, right foot 3 times, left foot 4 times. It's like the forest is counting my steps and playing them back to me in some kind of math problem. This is crazy. Forests don't do math. I try to ignore it and keep walking, but the counting footsteps make my skin crawl. It reminds me of something, but I can't figure out what. Maybe a song Margaret used to hum while she cooked dinner. Or maybe the beeping of medical equipment at the hospital. I come to a small clearing where the trees form a perfect circle. In the middle, there's a large rock with something carved into it. The letters are old and worn, but I can still read them. Where learned men play with forces beyond knowing, the hungry darkness feeds on empty souls. What the hell does that mean? Learned men, like teachers or scientists. And what's this about? Hungry darkness? I take a picture of the rock with my phone, even though there's still no signal. At least I'll have proof that I saw this weird message. As I'm putting my phone away, I notice something moving in the trees. A fox sits about 20 feet away, watching me. That's not unusual. Foxes live in forests. But this one is sitting perfectly still, like a statue. and it's staring right at me with these bright, intelligent eyes. I've seen a lot of animals in my life, but I've never seen one look at me quite like this, like it's studying me, like it's taking notes. The fox tilts its head to one side, then the other. Its eyes never leave mine. Then it does something that makes my blood go cold. It nods at me, just once. A slow, deliberate nod, like it's saying hello. Animals don't nod. Animals don't think like that. I blink hard and look again. The fox is gone. No sound, no movement. Through the bushes. Just gone. My hands are shaking now. I tell myself it's just the stress of everything. The divorce, the new job, being alone out here. But deep down, I know something is wrong with this place. The air itself feels wrong. It smells like the hospital where I used to work, that sharp chemical smell of cleaning supplies. But mixed with something else, something burnt, like when you leave food on the stove too long. And underneath it all, there's another smell I recognize but don't want to think about. The smell of sadness. The way my apartment smells now that Margaret is gone. How can a forest smell like loneliness? I keep walking because I don't know what else to do. The trees around me grow in patterns that hurt my eyes to look at. Perfect rows, then perfect spirals, then geometric shapes that look like they were drawn with a ruler. Trees don't grow like this naturally. Someone or something arranged them this way. Without thinking, I start humming. It's an old song I used to sing when Margaret and I first got married. A happy song about dancing and holding hands. But as soon as the melody leaves my lips, the air in front of me shimmers. I stop humming. The shimmer fades. I start again, just a few notes. The air ripples like water, and for just a second, I can see through it to somewhere else, somewhere dark. I stop humming and step backward. What the hell was that? My heart is pounding now. This isn't stress or imagination. This is real. Something is happening in this forest that doesn't make sense, something that breaks the rules of how the world is supposed to work. I look around at the perfect geometric trees, listen to my mathematical footsteps, and smell the hospital sadness, loneliness in the air. Every instinct I developed as a paramedic is screaming at me to get out of here, to run back to my truck, and drive away and never come back. But I can't. This is my job now. This is all I have left. I pull Margaret's wedding ring out of my pocket and hold it tight. The metal is warm and familiar, real, normal. It reminds me that there's still a world outside this forest where things make sense, even if I'm not part of that world anymore. As I stand there holding the ring, the wind picks up. But it doesn't sound like normal wind. It sounds like whispers, like voices talking just quietly enough that I can't understand the words. And all around me, the shadows keep bending toward my feet, like they're trying to touch me. I need to keep moving. Standing still makes everything worse. The whispers get louder, and the shadows stretch further toward me. I follow a smaller trail that leads deeper into the forest. After about 15 minutes of walking, I see something that doesn't belong here. Metal gleaming through the trees. I push through some bushes and find a small clearing filled with equipment. Not camping gear or park maintenance stuff. Scientific equipment, computers, cables, and machines I don't recognize. Everything is covered with tarps, but some of them have blown off in the wind. There's a generator humming quietly in the corner. Someone has been using this stuff recently. I walk closer and see labels on the equipment. Harvard University, Parapsychology Department. Under that, in smaller letters, Project Mindbridge, authorized personnel only. Parapsychology. I remember that word from college. It's the study of psychic stuff. Mind reading, moving things without touching them, talking to ghosts. The kind of thing most scientists think is fake. But here's expensive equipment from Harvard University sitting in the middle of a state forest. I find a folder under one of the tarps. It's full of papers and photographs. The top page has an official government seal and says Department of Defense, Classified Research Grant. My hands shake as I read the first page. Objective: prove human consciousness can manipulate physical reality through focused thought. Military applications include remote surveillance and psychokinetic warfare capabilities. Psychokinetic warfare. Moving things with your mind to fight wars. I flip through more pages. There are photos of people floating in the air, not jumping, or hanging from wires, actually floating with their feet 3 feet off the ground. The expressions on their faces look peaceful, like they're sleeping, but their eyes are open. There are charts showing brainwave patterns and something called quantum consciousness fields. Most of it is too complicated for me to understand, but I get the basic idea. These Harvard scientists think they can prove that human thoughts can change reality. One page catches my attention. It's titled Subject Selection Criteria. I read it slowly. Test subjects must exhibit high levels of emotional isolation and vulnerability to psychic influence. Divorced individuals, recent trauma survivors, and those experiencing acute loneliness show the strongest response to consciousness manipulation protocols. My stomach drops. Divorced individuals, those experiencing acute loneliness. They were looking for people like me. I keep reading. The next section talks about the Freetown Fall River test site. It says this forest has been used for experiments since 1970, 53 years of secret tests. The location shows unusual electromagnetic properties that amplify psychic phenomena. Local folklore describes reality distortions dating back to colonial times. Ideal for consciousness research away from public oversight. I think about the carved stone I found earlier. Where learned men play with forces beyond knowing, the hungry darkness feeds on empty souls. Maybe it wasn't just old superstition. Maybe someone was trying to warn people about what scientists were doing here. There's a section about something called entity contact events. The language is careful and scientific, but it's describing something that makes my skin crawl. During consciousness expansion experiments, subjects reported contact with non-human intelligence. Initial assumption was hallucination, but psychokinetic effects suggest actual interdimensional communication. Entity appears to feed on human emotional energy, particularly isolation and despair. An entity that feeds on loneliness and despair. And they kept doing experiments anyway. I find photos from the experiments, people sitting in chairs with wires attached to their heads. In the early photos, they look normal, but in later ones, their faces are blank, empty, like something has been taken out of them. The last page in the folder is a handwritten note. Day 847. We've made a mistake. The entity is no longer contained to the test subjects. It's growing stronger and affecting the entire area. Recommend immediate shutdown of all operations. The hunger it feels is not natural. It wants to spread beyond the forest. The note is dated 3 months ago, right around the time Margaret left me. I dropped the folder and stepped back from the equipment. 3 months ago, they lost control of whatever they were experimenting with. And now I'm here, alone and vulnerable. Exactly the kind of person their research says is most at risk. This can't be a coincidence. The timing is too perfect. My phone, it buzzes. I look down and see I have signal again. There's a text message from an unknown number. We've been waiting for you, Jim. The phone falls from my hands and hits the ground. Nobody should know my name. Nobody knows I'm here except Carl. Back at the ranger station, I look around the clearing. The equipment is still humming. The folders are scattered where I dropped them. But now I notice something else. My footprints in the dirt only go one way. The path I took to get here shows my boots walking into the clearing. But there are no footprints showing how the scientists got their equipment here. No tire tracks, from trucks or ATVs. It's like this stuff just appeared here, like it was never brought in by normal people at all. I pick up my phone with shaking hands. The screen is cracked, but it still works. The text message is gone. no record of it at all. But I know what I saw. Something in this forest knows who I am. Something that Harvard scientists accidentally let loose. And now it's been waiting for someone like me to walk into its trap. I grab one of the folders and stuff it in my jacket pocket. Evidence. Proof of what's happening here. Then I start walking back toward the main trail as fast as I can without running. Behind me, the generator's hum gets louder and louder and louder, like it's following me. I walk fast back toward the main trail, but everything looks different. Now, the trees that were in perfect patterns before have moved. They're still geometric, but the shapes have changed. What used to be circles are now triangles. What used to be straight lines are now spirals. Trees don't move. Trees can't move. But I know what I saw before, and this isn't it. My breathing gets heavy. I try to stay calm, but my paramedic training is kicking in. Racing heart, sweaty palms, shallow breathing. These are signs of panic, and panic gets people killed. I stop walking and take 3 deep breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Just like I used to tell patients in the ambulance. Stay calm, help is coming. But there's no help coming for me. As I stand there trying to control my breathing, I see something that makes my blood freeze. There's a person floating about 10 feet off the ground between 2 trees. It's a middle-aged woman in hiking boots and a red jacket. She's just hanging there in the air like she's lying on an invisible bed. Her eyes are open, but she's not moving. Not even breathing that I can see. I call out to her, "Hey, are you okay?" She doesn't respond, doesn't even blink. I move closer and see that she's not alone. There's a man floating nearby, and beyond him 2 more people, all of them just hanging in the air with that same peaceful, empty look on their faces. These must be the hikers from the research photos, the test subjects. I pull out my phone to call 911, but the screen shows that text message again. "We've been waiting for you, Jim." I didn't imagine it. It's real. The phone gets warm in my hands. Hot, actually. Too hot to hold. I drop it again, and this time when it hits the ground, the screen goes completely black. The air around me starts to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. But it's not hot here. It's actually getting colder. The shimmer forms into a shape. It's purple and shifting, like smoke, but thicker, more solid. And it's moving. Toward me with purpose. I back away, but the thing follows me. As it gets closer, I can see it's not just random smoke. It's trying to become something. The purple energy swirls and forms into the shape of a person, a woman with blonde hair and kind eyes. Margaret. "Hello, Jimmy," she says in Margaret's voice. Perfect. Exactly how she used to sound when she got home from work. But it's not her. It can't be her. "You're not real," I say, but my voice comes out as a whisper. "I'm as real as you want me to be." The thing wearing Margaret's face says, "I came back just like you wanted." She looks exactly right. Same smile, same way of tilting her head when she talks, even wearing the blue dress she wore on our first date. But her eyes are wrong. They're too bright, like there's a light behind them. "You left me," I tell her. "I made a mistake," she says, stepping closer. "I should have stayed. I should have helped you instead of running away." Everything in me wants to believe her, wants to reach out and touch her hand and pretend. The last 3 months never happened. But I know what I read in those research files. This thing feeds on loneliness and despair. "You're not Margaret," I say, louder this time. The fake Margaret smiles sadly. "You always were too smart for your own good." The purple energy shifts. Again. And now it's not Margaret anymore. It's Mr. Rodriguez, the first patient I ever lost as a paramedic. Heart attack at age 34. 3 kids at home. "You could have saved me, Jim," he says. "If you'd been faster, if you'd tried harder." Then he changes into Mrs. Chen, who died in a car accident while I was giving her CPR. Then Tommy Brennan, the teenager who overdosed while I was trying to find a vein for the IV. One by one, every patient I couldn't save stands before me in that shifting purple light. All of them, talking at once. You failed us. You weren't good enough. You let us die. I know it's not real. I know these are just shapes the entity is making to hurt me. But hearing their voices again, seeing their faces, it cuts deeper than any physical pain I've ever felt. Stop, I say, but they keep talking, keep blaming me. The voices get louder and more desperate. They're all talking over each other now, a chorus of disappointment and death. I fall to my knees and cover my ears, but the voices don't come from outside. They're in my head now. You're a failure, Jim. Margaret left because you're not worth staying for. Everyone you touch dies or leaves. The purple energy swirls around me like a tornado. I can feel it pulling at something inside my chest, something important, like it's trying to take the part of me that still cares about anything. Through the chaos, I hear something else, a different voice, quiet but clear. Margaret's real voice, not the fake one. A memory of something she told me the day before she left. I still love you, Jim. That's what makes this so hard. She didn't leave because she stopped caring. She left because caring was killing her too. The purple energy feels my moment of understanding and pulls harder, but now I know what it is. It's not just feeding on my loneliness. It's trying to take away every connection I've ever had, every moment of love or purpose or hope. It wants to make me completely empty, but I won't let it. I stand up slowly, my legs shaking. The voices of the dead patients keep screaming at me, but I speak over them. You're not them, I say to the entity, and you don't get to use their faces. The purple energy flickers like a TV with bad reception. You don't get to use Margaret either. The entity pulls back slightly, and the voices get quieter. For the first time since I walked into this forest, I feel like I have some control. Not much, but enough to fight back. The floating hikers above me start to drift lower toward the ground. Whatever hold this thing has on them is weakening, but I can feel it getting angry now. The air around me grows colder, and the purple light gets brighter and more violent. If I'm going to survive this, I need to remember who I really am. Not the failures, not the loneliness, but the person who saved lives for 15 years. The person Margaret fell in love with before everything went wrong. The entity doesn't like that I'm fighting back. The purple light around me gets darker, angrier. It swirls faster, like a storm cloud gathering strength. You think you can resist me? It says, but now it doesn't sound like Margaret or any of my patients. It sounds like nothing human, like wind blowing through empty places. The air in front of me splits open like a crack in glass. Through the crack, I can see other places, other worlds. In one, I see myself sitting alone in my apartment, but it's different, dirtier, sadder. There are empty bottles everywhere, and I look like I haven't showered in weeks. This version of me is talking to the walls, arguing with people who aren't there. In another crack, I see myself back at work as a paramedic, but every patient I touch dies. Every single one. My hands have become poison. Margaret is there too, but she's afraid of me. She runs away every time I try to get close. These are the worlds where you belong, the entity says. Worlds where you're truly alone, where no one can be hurt by your failures. More cracks open. In each one, I see myself more broken than the last. In some, I never became a paramedic at all. I'm homeless, living under bridges. In others, I hurt people instead of helping them. In the worst one, I'm the reason Margaret is dead. Pick one, the entity says. Anyone. I can send you there right now. No more pain, no more trying and failing. Just pure, simple emptiness. The cracks are hypnotic. Part of me wants to step through one of them. The pain of losing Margaret, the guilt over every patient I couldn't save, the fear of being alone forever. it would all go away. But then I remember something. A call I went on 2 years ago, an old man having a heart attack in his kitchen. He was alone, just like me now. His wife had died the year before, and he told me he didn't see the point in living anymore. Nobody needs me, he said while I worked on him in the ambulance. Nobody cares if I live or die. I care, I told him. Right now, in this moment, you're the most important person in my world. He lived. Last I heard, he was volunteering at a soup kitchen, helping other people who felt forgotten. I mattered to him. I made a difference. The entity feels me remembering this and pulls harder, but I keep thinking about Mrs. Patterson who hugged me after I delivered her baby in the back of a taxi, about the teenager I talked down from a bridge when he wanted to kill himself, about all the people who are alive today because I was there when they needed help. Margaret was wrong about one thing. I didn't just save strangers. I saved people, real people with families and dreams and problems just like mine. You can't have those memories, I tell the entity. The cracks in the air start to close, but the entity isn't done with me yet. The purple light forms into something new. Not a person this time, but a feeling. Suddenly, I'm not standing in the forest anymore. I'm back in my apartment on the day Margaret left. I can smell her perfume in the air and hear her moving around in the bedroom, packing her clothes. I want to go to her, to apologize, to beg her to stay. But I know if I do, she'll just leave faster. So I sit on the couch and do nothing while the most important person in my life walks away. This is your real failure, the entity whispers. Not the patience you lost, the woman you loved and you let her go without a fight. The memory plays over and over, Margaret packing, me sitting, the note on the refrigerator, the sound of the door closing behind her. Each time it repeats, the pain gets worse, like a knife twisting in my chest. I can feel the entity feeding on it, getting stronger. But then I remember something else, something I've been trying not to think about. The night before Margaret left, she came to me while I was sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. She sat down next to me and took my hand. "Talk to me, Jimmy," she said, "please. I know you're hurting, but I can't help if you won't let me in." I didn't talk to her. I just squeezed her hand and said I was fine. Another lie to protect her from my pain, another wall between us. She cried that night. I heard her in the bathroom, trying to be quiet so I wouldn't know. But I knew, and I still didn't go to her. "You see," the entity says, "you destroyed your own marriage. You chose to be alone." But that's not the whole truth. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I should have talked to her more, trusted her with my problems. But Margaret made a choice too. She chose to leave instead of fighting for us. We both gave up. We both failed. And maybe that's okay. Maybe some things break, and you can't fix them no matter how much you want to. The entity doesn't like this thought. The purple light flickers and pulls back. "You're supposed to feel guilty," it says, sounding confused. "You're supposed to hate yourself." I do feel guilty, I say. But guilt isn't the same as being empty. And I'm not ready to be empty yet. The memory of Margaret packing fades away. I'm back in the forest, surrounded by floating hikers and purple light. But something has changed. The entity doesn't feel as strong as it did before. It's been feeding on my loneliness and guilt. But those feelings aren't all I have inside me. There's anger too. At Margaret for leaving without trying harder. At myself for shutting her out. At this thing, for trying to take away the few good memories I have left. "You want to eat my feelings?" I say to the entity. "Then eat this one too." I let myself feel angry. Really angry, at everything that's gone wrong in my life, at the unfairness of it all, at the fact that trying to help people sometimes means losing the ones you love most. The entity tries to feed on the anger, but anger is different from sadness. Anger fights back. Anger doesn't. Just lie down and let itself be consumed. The purple light starts to shrink. The floating hikers drift lower toward the ground. But I know this isn't over. The entity is just regrouping, getting ready for one final attack, and I can feel it preparing something that will test everything I think I know about myself. The entity pulls all its purple light together into one tight ball. The air around me gets so cold, I can see my breath. The floating hikers drop to the ground with soft thuds, but they don't wake up. They just lie there like broken dolls. "You want to remember the good times?" the entity says. "Let me show you what they really mean." The purple ball explodes outward, and suddenly I'm not just remembering my life as a paramedic. I'm living it again. Every call, every emergency, every person I tried to save. But this time I can feel what they felt. I'm Mrs. Patterson, screaming in pain as I give birth in the back of a taxi. I feel the terror of not knowing if my baby will be okay. I feel grateful when I helped bring my child safely into the world. I'm the old man with the heart attack, lying on his kitchen floor, thinking about his dead wife. I feel the loneliness that was eating him alive, and then the relief when someone tells me I matter. I'm the teenager on the bridge, so sad I can't see any reason to keep living. I feel the hopelessness that made death seem like the only answer. And then the spark of hope when someone talks to me like I'm worth saving. One by one, I feel what every person I helped felt. Their pain, their fear, their gratitude. All of it flowing through me at once. The entity thinks this will break me. It thinks feeling all that pain will make me give up. But it's wrong. Yes, I feel their pain, but I also feel something else. I feel how much it meant to them that someone cared enough to help. I feel their relief when they realized they weren't alone in their worst moments. I wasn't just doing a job. I was proving to scared, hurt people that someone in the world gave a damn about whether they lived or died. That matters. That will always matter. "You still failed some of them," the entity says, but it sounds weaker now. "Mr. Rodriguez, Mrs. Chen, Tommy Brennan, they died anyway." "Yes," I say, "they did." I let myself remember the failures too, the people I couldn't save, no matter how hard I tried. But instead of just feeling guilty, I tried to feel what they felt in their last moments. Mr. Rodriguez looking up at me as his heart gave out. He wasn't angry, he was grateful that someone was there, that he didn't die alone. Mrs. Chen holding my hand as I tried to keep her alive after the car accident. She squeezed my fingers and whispered thank you, even though she knew she was dying. Tommy Brennan, the kid who overdosed. Even as his body shut down, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry I messed up so bad." They didn't blame me for not being able to save them. They were grateful that someone tried, that someone cared enough to fight for their lives, even when the fight was already lost. The entity pulls back, confused. "You're supposed to feel worthless. You're supposed to hate yourself for failing them." "I do hate that I failed them," I say, "but hating myself won't bring them back, and it won't honor what they meant to me." I reach into my pocket and pull out my wedding ring. The metal is warm from being close to my body for so many months. "Margaret," I say out loud, not to the entity, but to the real Margaret, wherever she is. "I'm sorry I shut you out. I'm sorry I chose my guilt over our love. You deserved better than that." The words feel strange coming out of my mouth. I've been thinking them for months, but I never said them before. "I forgive you for leaving," I continue, "and I forgive myself for not being the husband you needed." The purple light around me starts to flicker like a candle in the wind. I pull out my phone. It's still cracked, but it works. I have signal again. Without thinking too hard about it, I dial Margaret's number. She answers on the third ring. "Jim, what's wrong?" It's the middle of the day. Hearing her real voice, not the fake one the entity used, makes my chest tight, but it's a good tight, like a hug. "Nothing's wrong," I say. "I just wanted to tell you something." "Okay," she says carefully. "What is it?" "I'm sorry for all of it. for choosing work over you, for not talking to you when I was hurting, for making you feel like you had to fix me instead of just loving me. There's silence on the other end. Then I hear her crying softly. Jim, she says, I'm sorry too. I should have tried harder. I should have made you talk to me instead of just walking away. We both messed up, I tell her, but that doesn't mean what we had wasn't real. It doesn't mean it didn't matter. It did matter, she says. It still matters. The entity's purple light is fading fast now. The cold air is warming up. Around me, the floating hikers are starting to move, groaning softly as they wake up. I have to go, I tell Margaret, but thank you for answering, for talking to me. Take care of yourself, Jimmy, she says. Really take care of yourself this time. I hang up the phone and look at the entity. It's barely visible now, just a faint purple glow in the air. You can't have my loneliness, I tell it, because I'm not alone anymore. I never was alone. I just forgot how to see the connections I had. The entity makes one last attempt to grab hold of me, but there's nothing left for it to feed on. My guilt is still there, but it's not poisonous anymore. My sadness about Margaret is still there, but it's mixed with gratitude for the time we had together. The purple light fades completely. The entity is gone, but I can feel something else in its place, a heaviness in the air like a storm coming. The entity may be gone, but whatever brought it here in the first place is still active. I look around at the hikers who are sitting up now, confused but alive. They need help getting out of here, and I need to figure out how to make sure this never happens to anyone else. The fight isn't over, it's just beginning. I help the hikers to their feet. There are 4 of them, 2 men and 2 women, all middle-aged, all looking confused and scared. They don't remember floating in the air. They don't remember the purple light or the entity. They just remember starting to hike this morning and then waking up on the ground. What happened? Asks the woman in the red jacket. How long were we out here? I check my watch. It's almost sunset. These people have been missing for hours, maybe days. Their families are probably worried sick. You got lost, I tell them, but you're safe now. I'm a park ranger. I'll get you back to the parking lot. It's not the whole truth, but they don't need to know about entities and government experiments. They need to get home to their families and forget this place exists. As we walk back toward the main trail, I notice changes in the forest. The trees aren't in geometric patterns anymore. They look normal, random, the way trees should look. The shadows fall in the right directions. My footsteps don't echo in mathematical sequences. Whatever the entity did to this place is fading, but I can feel something else, a tingling in the back of my mind, like someone watching me from far away. Not the entity. That's gone. This is something different, something bigger. I get the hikers safely to their cars and watch them drive away. Then I go back to the ranger station to write my report. Carl is still there, finishing up paperwork. How was your first day? He asks. Interesting, I say. Found some hikers who got turned around. They're okay now. I don't mention the Harvard equipment or the government files. Not yet. I need to think about what to do with that information. That night, I drive home to my apartment. It still feels too big for one person, but it doesn't feel as empty as it did this morning. I make 1 cup of coffee instead of 2, and I don't read Margaret's note on the refrigerator. Instead, I sit on my couch and think about what happened in the forest. The entity fed on loneliness and despair, but when I stopped feeling completely alone, when I remembered my connections to other people, it lost its power over me. That makes sense in a weird way. Even monsters have rules they have to follow, but here's what bothers me. The Harvard researchers opened some kind of door when they did their experiments. They contacted something from somewhere else, something that shouldn't exist in our world. And even though I defeated this particular entity, the door might still be open. There could be others. Over the next few weeks, I go back to the forest every day for work. I collect all the Harvard equipment and hide it in a storage unit. I take photos of the government documents and send copies to a journalist friend who asks hard questions about classified programs. The forest stays normal, quiet, peaceful, but I start noticing things in other places. At the grocery store, I see a man standing in the cereal aisle, staring at nothing. He's been there for 20 minutes, not moving, barely breathing. When I walk past him, he turns to look at me, and his eyes are too bright, too aware. At a gas station, I watch a woman pumping gas into her car, but the gas keeps flowing even after her tank is full, spilling onto the ground. She doesn't notice. She's looking at me instead, smiling with too many teeth. On the highway, I pass the same blue sedan 3 times in 10 minutes. Each time, the driver waves at me like we're old friends. But it's impossible. I've been driving in a straight line, and the sedan should be miles behind me by now. Small things, weird things, things that could be coincidences or stress or my imagination. But I don't think they are. I think defeating the entity in the forest did something to me, changed me somehow, made me visible to things that used to ignore humans completely. The tingling in the back of my mind gets stronger every day. Sometimes, late at night, I hear whispers in languages I don't understand. Sometimes, I see shadows moving in ways shadows shouldn't move. Margaret calls me twice a week now. We talk about normal things, her job, the weather, movies we've watched. We're not getting back together, but we're not enemies anymore either. We're something new, something better than what we were before. She says I sound different, calmer, more like the person she fell in love with years ago. I am different. Defeating the entity taught me that being alone and being lonely aren't the same thing. I have connections to people, even if they're not the connections I used to have. Every person I helped as a paramedic, every life I touched, every moment of kindness I shared, those connections are still there. They're part of who I am. But being less lonely made me something else too. Something that catches the attention of beings from places where loneliness is just another word for food. Last night I dreamed about standing in a vast space filled with purple light. But this time, the light wasn't just one entity. It was thousands of them, maybe millions. All of them watching me, all of them hungry. And in the dream, I realized something that made me wake up in a cold sweat. The entity I defeated wasn't hunting me because I was vulnerable. It was testing me, seeing if humans could resist their influence, and by winning I proved that we could. Now, they all know. Every hungry thing in every dark corner of existence knows that there's a world full of beings who can fight back, who can choose connection over isolation, love over fear. They know about Earth now, and they're coming. I get up every morning and go to work in the forest. I help lost hikers and check on campers and make sure nobody starts fires where they shouldn't. I do my job and I do it well, but I also watch and I wait, because I know that what happened in Freetown Fall River State Forest was just the beginning. The real test is still coming, and when it does, I'll be ready, even if I have to face it alone. My name is Maria Gonzalez, and I've been a park ranger in the Bridger-Teton National Forest for 3 years now. Before this, I was an EMT in the city, but that's a story for another time. Today started like any other winter patrol. Snow covered, everything in sight, making the world look clean and perfect. My truck moved slowly down the mountain road, chains on the tires making that familiar crunching sound. I loved days like this. The quiet helped me think, but then I saw something strange, footprints in the snow beside the road. Boot prints, heading up toward the ridge. Nothing weird about that except these prints looked fresh. Really fresh. Like someone had just walked by minutes ago. But here's the thing that made my skin crawl. The prints seemed to go backward, like whoever made them was walking in reverse, step by step. I stopped the truck and got out to look closer. The cold air hit my face like a slap. I knelt down and studied the prints. They definitely went the wrong way. The heel marks were in front, the toe marks behind, as if someone had walked backward for miles. I shook my head and got back in the truck. People do weird things in the mountains. Maybe it was some kind of hiking challenge or something. The silence hit me as I drove on. At first, I enjoyed it. No city noise, no sirens, no people yelling, just me and the mountains. But after a while, the quiet felt wrong, too complete. Even inside the truck with the heater running, I couldn't hear anything, not even my own heartbeat, which usually pounds pretty loud when I'm nervous. I tried humming to break the silence, but my voice sounded flat and dead in the air. That's when I saw the rabbit. A small brown rabbit hopped across the road right in front of me. I had to brake a little. It stopped, looked at me with those big black eyes, then hopped into the trees on the other side. 2 minutes later, the exact same thing happened. Same rabbit, same spot, same look. It even paused in the exact same place and tilted its head the same way before disappearing into the same trees. My hands started to shake on the steering wheel. The radio crackled to life, making me jump. "Maria, you there?" came the voice from dispatch. "Yeah, I'm here," I said, grabbing the radio. "Got a report of missing hunters up in Sector 7. 3 men didn't come back yesterday. Families are worried." The voice sounded familiar. Too familiar. It had the same way of saying my name that my brother Miguel used to have. The same little pause before the A at the end. Miguel had been dead for 4 years. "Copy that," I managed to say. "I'll head up there and take a look." "Thanks, Maria. Be careful up there." The radio went quiet. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart now beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. I turned the heater up higher, but my breath still came out in little white puffs when I spoke. The truck's heater worked fine. I could feel the warm air blowing on my hands, but somehow the cold seemed to be coming from inside me. As I drove towards Sector 7, I caught something moving in the corner of my eye. Snow was falling, but not down, up. Little white flakes drifting upward like they were running away from the ground. But when I turned to look directly, the snow fell normally. I started humming again without thinking about it. The song was Cielito Lindo, Miguel's favorite. He used to sing it when he was working on his car. The melody felt good in my throat, warm and familiar. Then I heard something answer back from the trees. Not an echo. Something else humming along, but wrong, like it was learning the tune as it went, making mistakes and correcting them. The sound seemed to move from tree to tree, staying just out of sight. I stopped humming. The forest stopped too. The mountain peaks ahead looked strange, sharp and jagged in ways that hurt to look at, like they were hungry for something, like they were leaning down toward me, even though I knew mountains don't move. I checked my supplies in the back of the truck. Medical kit, emergency food, blankets, and 3 bags of blood plasma. I always carried extra plasma since Miguel died, more than any ranger needed, more than made sense, but I couldn't help myself. You never know when someone might need it. That's when I saw the sign. Carved into a tree by the roadside were symbols that looked Native American, Shoshone maybe. I couldn't read them, but they gave me a feeling like ice water in my stomach. Below them, someone had scratched words in English. "Where winter walks with summer, the starving spirit wakes." I sat in my truck, staring at those words, and for the first time in 3 years, I wondered if I should turn around and go home. But I couldn't. 3 hunters were missing, and if they were hurt, they needed help. That's what I do. That's all I know how to do anymore. I put the truck in drive and headed deeper into the forest toward Sector 7, toward whatever was waiting for me there. The quiet followed me like a shadow. I've always had kind eyes. That's what people tell me anyway. Miguel used to say I had eyes that made people want to tell me their problems. Maybe that's why I became an EMT after he died. Maybe I thought, if I could save enough people, it would make up for not saving him. The thing is, I was there when it happened. 4 years ago, on a rainy Tuesday night, Miguel's car slid off the road and hit a tree. I found him 20 minutes later, coming home from my job at the diner. He was still breathing when I got to him. "Maria," he whispered, blood on his lips. "Help me." But I didn't know how. I wasn't trained then. I just held his hand and watched him die while we waited for the ambulance. 23 minutes. I counted every second. After the funeral, I signed up for EMT school. I told myself it was to help people, but really I just wanted to go back to that night and know what to do. I wanted to save Miguel over and over again through other people. For 2 years, I rode in ambulances around Phoenix. I learned to stop bleeding, restart hearts, keep people breathing. I got good at it, really good. But sometimes people still died. Every time I lost someone, I saw Miguel's face. Every time someone bled out while I worked on them, I heard him asking me to help him. It got so I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I started carrying his medical ID bracelet in my pocket, the one that said, "Give Maria my strength." I would touch it during bad calls and whisper, "I'm trying, Miguel, I'm trying." The worst part was how much I needed to save people. It wasn't just my job anymore. It was like hunger, but for helping others. If I heard sirens and wasn't working, I would follow them. If I saw an accident, I had to stop. I couldn't walk away from anyone who needed help. My supervisor called it hero complex. My therapist called it survivor guilt. I called it Tuesday. That's why I moved out here. City ambulances reminded me too much of that night. The smell of antiseptic, the sound of heart monitors, the way people looked at you when they were scared. It all brought back Miguel dying in my arms. Being a ranger was supposed to be different, quiet, peaceful, just me and the mountains and the occasional lost hiker. But even out here, I couldn't stop preparing for emergencies. My truck had enough medical supplies for a small hospital. Bandages, IV bags, pain medicine, and way too much blood plasma. I told myself it was just being careful. Deep down, I knew it was because I was still trying to save Miguel. I talk to him sometimes, out loud, when I'm alone. I tell him about my day, about the people I've helped, about how sorry I am. Sometimes I swear I can hear him talking back, telling me it's okay, that I did my best. My therapist said that was normal. She said guilt could make you hear things, see things. She said Miguel's soul wasn't really trapped because of what I did or didn't do. But she wasn't there that night. She didn't watch the light go out of his eyes. Now, driving toward Sector 7, all those old feelings came rushing back. 3 hunters missing. 3 people who might be hurt, might be dying, might be calling for help that wasn't coming. I pressed harder on the gas pedal. The road got narrower as I climbed higher. Pine trees pressed in on both sides, their branches heavy with snow. Everything looked the same, white and quiet and empty. But something felt wrong, not just the weird stuff from before. This was different. It felt like being watched. I kept checking my mirrors but saw nothing. Just trees and snow and the gray. Sky getting darker, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Like eyes following me, waiting for something. That's when I heard Miguel's voice again. Not from the radio this time. From inside my head, clear as day. "Maria, you have to save them. You have to hurry." I pulled over and sat there, hands shaking. This was new. In 4 years, I'd never heard him this clearly. Never heard him sound so desperate. "They're starving, Maria. They need you. Don't let them die like I did." I touched his bracelet in my pocket. The metal felt warm, even though everything else was cold. "I'm coming," I whispered. "I won't let them down." I drove faster after that, taking curves too quickly, engine straining as we climbed. The feeling of being watched got stronger. Sometimes I caught glimpses of movement in the trees, but when I looked directly, nothing was there. The road finally ended at a small parking area. 2 pickup trucks sat covered in snow, the missing hunters' vehicles probably. I parked next to them and got out. The silence hit me like a wall. No wind, no birds, no insects. Even my footsteps, in the snow sounded muffled and wrong, but underneath the quiet, I could swear I heard something else, something like crying very far away. I grabbed my medical bag and started following the trail that led up from the parking area. The snow was deep, coming up past my knees in places, but I could see boot prints ahead of me, leading up the mountain. As I walked, Miguel's voice kept talking to me. "Hurry, Maria, they don't have much time." "Where are they?" I asked out loud. "Follow the trail, you'll find them, but be careful. Something's wrong up there, something hungry." I should have been scared. A normal person would have been scared. But all I could think about was getting to those hunters before it was too late. I couldn't fail again. I couldn't watch someone else die when I might have been able to save them. The trail wound up through the trees for about a mile before opening into a small clearing. And that's where I found the camp. 3 tents arranged in a perfect triangle, a cold fire pit in the center. Camping gear scattered around like people had left in a hurry. But no people. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here? I'm with the Forest Service." No answer. Just that terrible quiet. I walked toward the nearest tent, my medical bag heavy in my hand. Inside my head, Miguel's voice got quieter, like he was moving away from me. "Be careful, Maria. Something's very wrong here." I was about to unzip the first tent when I saw them. More boot prints, leading away from the camp toward a thick stand of trees. But these prints were different from the ones I'd followed up the trail. These ones were deeper, heavier, and they were filled with something dark that wasn't snow. I knelt down and looked closer. The dark stuff was frozen, but I could tell what it was. Blood. A lot of blood. I followed the bloody tracks deeper into the trees. My medical training kicked in automatically. I could tell from the amount of blood that someone was badly hurt, maybe dying. I had to move fast. The trees got thicker as I walked. Big old pines that blocked out most of the grey sky. The bloody prints kept going, along with regular boot prints. At least one person was still walking, which was good news. After about 10 minutes, I found them. 3 men sitting around a small campfire, perfectly still. They didn't move when I approached, didn't even look up. "Hey," I called out. "Are you guys okay? I'm Maria, with the Forest Service. Your families are worried about you." Nothing. I got closer and realized why they weren't moving. They couldn't move. All 3 men were dead, but they'd been arranged like they were just sitting around the fire having a conversation. Their eyes were open, staring at the flames. Someone had posed them after they died. That should have been when I ran. Any normal person would have run, but I'm not normal anymore. Instead, I knelt down and started examining the bodies. What I saw made my stomach turn. These men hadn't been killed by an animal. The cuts were too clean, too precise. Someone had used tools, sharp ones. Medical tools, maybe. But worse than that, pieces of them were missing. Cut away carefully, like someone knew exactly what they were doing. I'd seen enough bodies during my EMT days to know what I was looking at. Someone had been eating these men. But not like a crazy person would, like a doctor performing surgery. That's when I noticed the equipment. Scattered around the campsite were things that didn't belong. A metal briefcase, half buried in snow. Some kind of electronic device with wires coming out of it. A radio that looked way too fancy for camping. I opened the briefcase first. Inside were papers, lots of them, all stamped with official-looking seals. The top page had a title that made my blood freeze: Project Stargate, Remote Viewing and Psychic Warfare Applications. I'd heard about Project Stargate before. Government experiments with people who claimed they could see things far away, red minds, stuff like that. Weird science that most people thought was fake, but these papers were real and recent. I flipped through them, reading as fast as I could. Most of it was technical stuff I didn't understand, but some parts were written in plain English, like reports from the field. One report talked about hunger entities, spirits that existed in psychic space and could be called up under the right conditions. Another mentioned experiments where people were deliberately starved to see if it would make them more psychically sensitive. My hands started shaking as I read more. The government had been studying something called a Wendigo. According to the files, it was a spirit that fed on human desperation and hunger. The researchers thought they could control it, use it as a weapon against enemy countries. But something had gone wrong. The electronic device started making noise, crackling static like a broken radio. Then voices came through, recorded voices of people talking about the experiment. "Day 12 of forced starvation," said a man's voice. "Subjects are reporting visual hallucinations and auditory phenomena. The entity appears to be responding to their desperation." Another voice, a woman: "We've lost contact with Research Team 3. Their last transmission mentioned something about the hunger that walks. Recommend immediate evacuation." A third voice panicked. "It's real, the thing is real, it's not just in their heads. We can see it on the instruments. It's feeding on them, making them want to... Oh God, Johnson just bit Rodriguez. They're eating each other." The voices cut out. Static filled the air. I looked around at the 3 dead men again. Now I understood what had happened to them. But I didn't understand why government people would be up here in the middle of nowhere, playing with something so dangerous. I kept reading the papers. More reports, more experiments. They'd been doing this for months, trying to figure out how to weaponize human hunger and desperation. They'd found that the Wendigo could be summoned anywhere people were starving, scared, and desperate enough. The worst part was a note at the bottom of one report. Entity shows particular attraction to medical personnel and emergency responders. Their compulsion to save others appears to provide ideal psychological conditions for manifestation. My mouth went dry. I stuffed the papers back in the briefcase and looked around the campsite more carefully. That's when I found the food, military rations, scattered everywhere. But they'd been opened and then thrown away, like someone had taken one bite and couldn't eat anymore. I picked up one of the packages and read the label. It looked normal, but there was a small sticker on the back. "Enhanced formula, experimental use only." Enhanced with what? I had a feeling I didn't want to know. The radio crackled to life again. This time the voices were clearer. "Subject maintains full consciousness during transformation process," said a clinical voice. "Retention of human awareness combined with spiritual possession creates optimal conditions for weaponization. Recommend proceeding to phase 3 trials." "What about the medical personnel?" asked another voice. "They seem to be particularly susceptible." "That's the beauty of it," came the reply. "Their guilt and compulsion to save others makes them perfect carriers. The entity spreads through people who can't stop helping, can't stop trying to rescue everyone they meet." The radio went silent. I sat there in the snow, surrounded by 3 dead men and government secrets, finally understanding what was happening to me. My need to save people, my guilt about Miguel, my inability to walk away from anyone in trouble. It wasn't just trauma. Something had been calling to me, something hungry. I should have left right then, should have grabbed the evidence and run back to town. But as I stood up to go, I heard it. Crying. Someone crying for help, deeper in the forest. "Please," came a voice through the trees. "Help me, I'm so hungry. Please don't leave me here." It was Miguel's voice. Every part of my brain screamed that this was a trap, that Miguel was dead, had been dead for 4 years, that whatever was making that sound wasn't human. But I couldn't help myself. I picked up my medical bag and started walking toward the sound. Behind me, the electronic device kept playing its recorded voices, talking about hunger and desperation and things that should never have been let loose in the world. But I wasn't listening anymore. All I could hear was Miguel calling for help, and I had to save him. Just like always, I followed Miguel's voice deeper into the forest. The crying got louder as I walked, more desperate. It sounded exactly like him. I knew his voice better than my own. "Maria, please hurry," he called out. "I'm so cold, so hungry. I've been waiting for you." The trees got thicker, blocking out what little light was left. I had to use my flashlight to see where I was going. The beam cut through the darkness, showing nothing but snow and pine needles. Then I saw him. Miguel stood about 20 feet away, leaning against a tree. He looked exactly like I remembered. Dark hair, kind eyes, the little scar on his chin from when we were kids. But something was wrong. He was too thin, like he hadn't eaten in weeks, and his clothes were the same ones he'd died in 4 years ago. "Miguel," I whispered. He smiled, and my heart broke all over again. "Hey, little sister, I knew you'd come for me." I wanted to run to him, hug him, tell him how sorry I was, but my medical training held me back. People don't come back from the dead. This had to be some kind of hallucination, maybe from stress, or the thin mountain air. "You're not real," I said, but my voice shook. "I'm as real as your guilt," he said, and his voice sounded different now, hungrier. "I'm as real as all those people you couldn't save." He pushed away from the tree, and that's when I saw how tall he was. Miguel had been average height, maybe 5'8". This thing was huge, 12 feet. Tall at least, but still wearing Miguel's face. "Do you remember Mrs. Patterson?" he asked, taking a step toward me. 83 years old, heart attack on 5th Street. You worked on her for 30 minutes, but she died anyway. I did remember. Sweet old lady who used to feed stray cats. I dreamed about her for weeks after. "Or little Tommy Rodriguez," the thing continued, growing taller with each word. 8 years old, car accident. You got his heart started twice, but it stopped again in the ambulance. My hands started shaking. I remembered Tommy too. His mother had screamed when we lost him. "That's not fair," I said. "I tried to save them. I did everything I could. But it wasn't enough, was it?" The thing that looked like Miguel was 15 feet tall now, its body stretching up toward the treetops. "It's never enough. That's why you're here, Maria. That's why you can't stop trying to save people." I could see through its skin now, like it was made of dirty water. Underneath, yellow bones showed through, and something black moved around inside like smoke. "I feed on people like you," it said, and now it spoke with dozens of voices, all the patients I'd lost over the years. People who can't stop helping, can't stop feeling guilty, medical workers, firefighters, cops, anyone whose job is to save. Others. The thing's face changed, becoming a mix of all the people who had died while I tried to help them. Mrs. Patterson's worried eyes, Tommy's scared expression, a dozen others I recognized. "The government found me years ago," it continued. "They thought they could control me, use me to make enemy soldiers hungry and desperate. But I'm not something you control. I'm something that spreads." It leaned down toward me, its face now just a few feet from mine. Up close, I could smell it, like old meat and hospital disinfectant. Every medical worker who feels guilty becomes a door for me to walk through. Every person who blames themselves for not saving someone becomes part of my family. Do you know how many of you there are, Maria? How many doctors and nurses and paramedics carry this guilt? I thought about my old EMT partner, Janet, who quit after losing a child in a fire. My supervisor, who drank too much because he couldn't forget the faces of people he couldn't save. How many of us were walking around with this kind of guilt, eating us alive? You're not just hungry for food, I realized. You're hungry for hope, for the part of people that wants to help others. The thing smiled with Miguel's mouth. Very good. I don't just eat meat, Maria. I eat compassion. I eat the desire to save people. I eat the part of you that makes you human. It was right. I could feel something inside me getting smaller, colder. The warm feeling I usually got when helping. People was fading away, like someone was slowly turning down a light. But I have good news. the creature said, its voice now sounding like Miguel again. "I can bring him back. Your real brother. I can undo that night 4 years ago. All you have to do is help me spread to other medical workers. Bring me more people like you." For a moment, I almost said yes. The thought of having Miguel back, of undoing the worst night of my life, was overwhelming. But then I remembered something. Miguel's medical ID bracelet, the one in my pocket. I pulled it out and read the words again. "Give Maria my strength." Not "bring Miguel back." Not "fix your mistakes." Give Maria strength. "He wouldn't want this," I said, looking up at the creature. "Miguel wouldn't want me to hurt other people just to bring him back." The thing's face twisted with anger. "You killed him, Maria. You let him die when you could have saved him." "No," I said. And for the first time in 4 years, I really meant it. I was just a kid working at a diner. I wasn't a doctor or a paramedic. I couldn't have saved him no matter what I did. The creature grew even taller, its shadow covering me completely. "But you became a paramedic after. You learned how to save people. You could go back and save him now." "I became a paramedic because I wanted to help people," I said. "Not because I thought I could change the past." That was a lie, and we both knew it. But saying it out loud made me realize something important. Somewhere along the way, helping people had become about more than just guilt. It had become about actually helping people. The creature sensed my thoughts changing and let out a sound like wind through broken glass. "You can't fight what you are, Maria. You can't stop trying to save everyone you meet. It's who you are. It's what makes you perfect for me." It was right about that. Even now, even knowing what this thing was and what it wanted, part of me still wanted to help it. Still wanted to ease its hunger, to fix whatever was wrong, but I had a different idea. "You're right," I said, backing slowly toward the frozen stream I'd noticed earlier. "I can't stop trying to save people, but that doesn't mean I have to save you." The creature followed me, its huge form moving between the trees like smoke. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my medical bag and started digging through it. "You said you feed on guilt, on the need to help others. But what if I gave you more than you could handle?" The thing paused, confused. "I found what I was looking for, the oxygen tanks I always carried for emergency breathing help. Small ones, but under pressure. And I had an idea that probably wouldn't work, but might give other people a chance to get away." "Come on then," I said, stepping onto the ice covering the stream. "Let me save you." The ice creaked under my feet as I backed toward the middle of the frozen stream. It was thick enough to hold me, but I could hear water moving underneath. If I was right about what I was planning, that wouldn't matter for much longer. The creature followed me onto the ice, its huge form making the whole surface shake. "You can't run from me, Maria. There's nowhere to go." "I'm not running," I said, pulling Miguel's medical bracelet from my pocket. "I'm giving you what you want." I held the bracelet up so it could see. This was Miguel's. It says, "Give Maria my strength." He wanted me to be strong enough to help people, but you know what? I think he meant something else. The creature stopped moving, watching me carefully. "I think he meant I should be strong enough to stop trying to save everyone," I said. "Even him." I threw the bracelet as hard as I could. It sailed over the creature's head and landed in the snow behind it. The thing turned to look, confused. That's when I started opening the oxygen tanks. These tanks were under a lot of pressure, enough to help someone breathe when their lungs weren't working right. But if you opened them all at once and added a little heat, they could do a lot more than that. "What are you doing?" the creature asked, turning back to me. "Helping you," I said, pulling out my emergency flare. "You said you're hungry, right? You eat guilt and the need to save people. Well, I've got 4 years' worth of both." I lit the flare. Bright red light filled the forest. "But here's the thing about feeding," I continued, holding the flare close to the oxygen tanks. You can eat too much. You can make yourself sick. The creature realized what I was planning and started moving toward me fast. But it was too late. I let the creature get close enough that I could feel its cold breath on my face, close enough that it started feeding on my guilt, pulling all those memories of failed rescues out of my head. Yes, it whispered, its voice becoming more like itself and less like Miguel. Give me all of it, every person you couldn't save, every moment you failed. I felt those memories leaving me. Mrs. Patterson's heart attack, Tommy Rodriguez's car accident, the dozen other patients I'd lost over the years, the guilt that had driven me to become an EMT, then a ranger, then someone who couldn't walk away from anyone in trouble. But while it was busy feeding on my guilt, I did something it wasn't expecting. I held the flare right against the oxygen tanks and threw myself backward off the ice. The explosion was bigger than I'd hoped. The oxygen tanks went off like bombs, sending fire and metal flying everywhere. The creature screamed, a sound like breaking glass mixed with wind through empty houses. The blast threw me into the water. The stream wasn't deep, but it was cold enough to knock the air out of my lungs. I came up gasping, my ears ringing from the explosion. Where the creature had been standing, there was now a hole in the ice and fire burning on the water. Some kind of oil or fuel from the government equipment must have gotten into the stream. The flames burned bright and hot, turning the snow around the edges to steam. But the creature wasn't gone. It stood in the middle of the fire, burning but not dying. Parts of it kept disappearing and coming back, like it couldn't decide if it was real or not. You can't destroy me, it said, but its voice sounded different. Now, weaker. I'm not just here. I'm everywhere people feel guilty about not saving others. I'm in every hospital, every ambulance, I know, I said, pulling myself out of the water, but I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm trying to change you. The creature looked confused. You fed on my guilt, I explained, wringing water from my jacket, all of it. Every bad memory, every person I blamed myself for losing. But you know what else you took? I could feel the difference inside myself. The warm feeling I used to get when helping people was gone. The driving need to save everyone I met had disappeared. Even looking at the creature burning in front of me, I didn't feel the urge to help it. You took my ability to care, I said. My need to save people. The part of me that made me want to help others, even when it was dangerous. The creature's eyes widened. No, that's not how it works. Isn't it? I asked. You said you eat compassion. You eat the desire to help others. Well, congratulations. You just ate mine. The fire started going. Out. The creature began to shrink, becoming more solid, more trapped in one form. But that means, it started to say, that means I'm immune to you now, I finished. I can't feel guilty about people I can't save, because I don't care anymore. I can't be driven to help others, because that part of me is gone. The creature collapsed to its knees in the dying flames. It was back to normal size now, but it wasn't Miguel anymore. It looked like a person made of old bones and shadows. You destroyed yourself to stop me, it said. Yeah, I said. I guess I did. The fire went out completely. The creature faded away like smoke, leaving nothing but burnt ice and the smell of something terrible that had been put out. I walked back to the government campsite and gathered up all the papers and equipment. Evidence that needed to get to. The right people, assuming there were any right people left in the government. But as I loaded everything into my truck, I realized something that made my blood run cold. I didn't care. I didn't care about exposing the conspiracy. Didn't care about warning other medical workers. Didn't care about the families of the dead hunters. I was going through the motions because it seemed like the logical thing to do, but the feeling wasn't there anymore. The part of me that had wanted to help people was gone. Really gone. I drove back to town and filed my report. I told the police where to find the bodies, gave the government papers to the FBI, and explained what had happened as best I could. They didn't believe most of it, of course, but the evidence was there, and the bodies were real, so they had to investigate. Over the next few weeks, I kept doing my job. I rescued lost hikers and gave first aid to injured campers and responded to emergency calls. But it felt like I was following a script someone else had written. The actions were the same, but the heart behind them was missing. I saved people because that's what rangers do, not because I cared if they lived or died. That was 3 years ago. Last month, I met another ranger at a training conference, Sarah from Colorado. Nice woman, about my age. She mentioned that she used to be a paramedic in Denver before becoming a ranger. "Why did you switch?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Lost too many people," she said, staring at her coffee. "Started having dreams about them. Felt like I could hear them calling for help even when I was off duty. My supervisor said I was getting too emotionally involved." I looked at her more carefully, the dark circles under her eyes. The way she checked her phone constantly, like she was waiting for an emergency call. The medical bag she carried, even though rangers aren't required to have one. "Sarah," I said carefully, "do you ever hear voices when you're alone in the forest?" She looked up at me, surprised. "How did you do?" "Yes, sometimes, usually patients I couldn't save. They asked me to help them. I bought her another coffee and told her my story, all of it. The creature, the government experiments, what I'd had to sacrifice to stop it. She didn't believe me at first, but then I showed her some of the government, documents I'd kept copies of. And I told her about the other former medical workers turned rangers I'd met over the past 3 years. 12 of them so far, all with the same story: guilt over lost patients, compulsive need to help others, voices calling them deeper into the woods, all of them dealing with something hungry that wore familiar faces. "But you stopped yours," Sarah said. "I stopped one," I corrected. "There are others, lots of others. The creature told me it spreads through people like us. Medical workers, firefighters, cops, anyone whose job is to save people and who feels guilty when they fail." Sarah was quiet for a long time. Finally she asked, "What happened to you after? I mean, how do you live without caring?" That was the question I'd been dreading for 3 years. "You don't live," I said. "You just exist. You go through the motions of helping people, but it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's like being colorblind, but for emotions." She stared at me. "So to save everyone else, you had to stop being able to save anyone that mattered." "Yeah," I said. "That's exactly what happened." Sarah left the conference early. I don't know if she believed me or just thought I was crazy, but 2 weeks later, I got a call from the Colorado Forest Service. Sarah had gone missing during a routine patrol. They found her truck at a trailhead, but no sign of her. I drove up to help with the search, even though I knew we wouldn't find her. Not alive, anyway. But on the 3rd day, she walked out of the forest on her own. She looked tired and thin, but physically okay. When they asked her what happened, she said she'd gotten lost and spent a few days wandering around before finding her way back. But I could see it in her eyes. The same emptiness I saw in my mirror every morning. She'd made the same choice I had, given up her ability to care in order to stop something that fed on caring. Now there are 2 of us, 2 former healers walking around without the ability to heal anything that really matters. And somewhere out there, in forests and hospitals, and ambulances across the country, the hungry things keep calling to people like we used to be. People who care too much. People who can't stop trying to save everyone. People who don't know yet that sometimes the only way to save others is to sacrifice the part of yourself that wants to save them. My name is Maria Gonzalez, and I used to be someone who could save people. Now I'm just someone who knows the price of salvation, and I'm not sure which is worse. My name is William Foster, but everyone calls me Bill. I'm 36 years old, and I used to work for the Coast Guard. Used to be the important words there. I don't work for them anymore because I did something terrible. Something I can't take back. I moved to the Pine Barrens in New Jersey to get away from the ocean, away from the water that reminds me every day of what I failed to do. The Pine Barrens seemed like a good place to hide. Just me, the trees, and the silence I thought I needed. But I was wrong about the silence. The first strange thing I noticed was the trees. Every single pine tree in this forest leans away from certain spots. Not toward the sun, not because of wind. They lean away like they're scared of something buried in the ground. When I asked old Pete at the general store about it, he just shook his head and said, "Some places ain't meant for growing things, son." I didn't understand what he meant then. I do now. I've been walking these paths for 3 months, trying to find some peace. The forest is beautiful during the day. Tall pine trees stretch up to the sky, and the sandy paths wind through them like golden ribbons. It should be peaceful. It should be quiet. But something's wrong here. Last Tuesday, I was walking my usual evening route when I pulled out my compass to check my direction. The needle didn't point north like it should. Instead, it pointed straight down, like it was trying to show me the way to hell. I tapped it, shook it, even held it up to the light. The needle kept pointing down. I threw that compass in the trash. When I got home, bought a new one the next day. Same thing happened. Then there was the owl. I love birds, always have. In the Coast Guard, seeing seagulls meant we were close to land. Birds meant safety. But the owl I saw 3 nights ago wasn't like any bird I'd ever seen. It was flying backward, not gliding backward or falling. Flying backward, wings flapping in reverse, while staring right at me with eyes that looked too human, too smart, like it knew things about me that I didn't want anyone to know. I stood there watching it until my neck hurt from looking up. The owl never blinked, never looked away, just kept flying backward in a perfect circle above my head, watching me with those terrible human eyes. When I finally went home, I could still feel it watching me through my window. The farmers have been talking too. Joe Miller, who runs the cattle farm on the east side, came into Pete's store yesterday morning looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. His hands were shaking when he poured his coffee. "Lost 12 head of cattle," he said to Pete, "all drained dry." "Coyotes?" Pete asked. Joe shook his head. "No teeth marks, no claw marks, just empty. Like something sucked all the blood right out of them, and they were arranged in a pattern, like someone was performing some kind of ceremony." I was pretending to read a magazine, but I was listening to every word. "What kind of pattern?" Pete asked. "Religious," Joe whispered, "like they were sacrificed for something holy or unholy." The smell is the worst part, though. The Pine Barrens used to smell like pine needles and clean air. Now there's something else mixed in, something that burns your nose and makes your eyes water. It smells like rotten eggs and chemicals and something else I can't name. Something that makes me think of guilt and shame and things that happened a long time ago. I know that smell. I smelled it the night I let those people die. The paths in the forest keep changing too. I walk the same route every day, but sometimes I end up in places I've never seen before. Yesterday, I found myself standing in a clearing where the sand was arranged in the shape of a 5-pointed star. A perfect star, like someone had used a giant compass to draw it. But when I came back an hour later with my camera, the star was gone. Just regular sand scattered by wind that I never felt. I've started whistling when I walk. Old sea songs from my Coast Guard days. They used to make me feel brave, make me feel like I belonged to something bigger than myself. But now when I whistle those songs, I hear something else. Bells. Church. Bells ringing somewhere far away. Bells from churches that aren't there anymore. The sound gets louder when I whistle, like my songs are calling to something that shouldn't be called. Last night, I couldn't sleep. I went outside and looked up at the stars, hoping to see something normal, something that made sense. The stars were spelling words, not English words, not any language I recognized, but somehow I could understand them anyway. They were spelling out accusations, crimes, names of people who had done terrible things to this place, and my name was there too. I found something else yesterday, carved into the bark of the oldest pine tree in the forest. Someone had burned words, not with a knife or an axe. Burned, like someone had used fire to write directly into the living wood. The words were in English, but they sounded old. Older than anything should sound in New Jersey. Where the cursed mother's child was born, the land remembers sin and pays it back sevenfold. I don't know what it means, but I know it's about me, about what I did, about what I failed to do when people needed me most. The forest knows what I did, the trees know, the stars know, and something else knows too. Something that's been waiting for me to find this place. Something that's been watching me with owl eyes and arranging dead cattle in religious patterns. Something that smells like sulfur and chemicals and guilt. I should leave. I should pack my things and drive as far away from the pine barrens as I can get. But I can't. Not yet. Because I think whatever's here isn't just haunting me. I think it's judging me. I need to tell you about Hurricane Donna, about the night that changed everything. It was 1960, 5 years ago. I was working rescue operations off the Florida coast. When the hurricane hit, the waves were 30 feet tall, maybe bigger. The wind was screaming so loud you couldn't think straight. We got a distress call from a fishing boat, family of 5 on board, a father, mother, and 3 kids. The youngest was only 6 years old. Their engine had died, and they were taking on water fast. I was on the rescue boat with my partner Jake. We found them about 2 miles out, their little boat getting tossed around like a toy. The father was waving his arms at us, and I could see the fear in his eyes even from a distance. That's when our engine started making strange noises. Jake looked at me and said, "We might not make it back if we tried to take all 5 of them." The waves were getting bigger. Our boat was smaller than it should have been for a rescue like this, and I could see their boat was sinking fast. I had maybe 30 seconds to make a decision. I chose wrong. I told Jake to back away. I told him we needed to radio for a bigger boat. I told him we couldn't risk 7 lives for 5. But the real truth was simpler than that. I was scared. I was 26 years old, and I didn't want to die in those black waters. We watched their boat go under, all 5 of them. The father was still waving when the water closed over his head. I have blue eyes, like deep ocean water. People used to say they were my best feature. But now, when I look in the mirror, I see their faces reflected back at me. The father, the mother trying to hold her children above the waves. The 6-year-old girl who looked right at me before she disappeared. The Coast Guard gave me a medal for that rescue mission. They said I showed good judgment by not risking more lives. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know I was just a coward. I kept a piece of their boat, a chunk of wood that washed up on shore 3 days later. I carry it in my pocket, everywhere I go. It's smooth now from my fingers rubbing it, but I can still see the blue paint they used on the side of their boat. I started drinking after that. Rum, mostly. It helped me sleep without hearing the sound of children calling for help from dark water. But even rum couldn't make me forget completely. The ocean started talking to me. Every time I went out on a new rescue, I could hear it whispering the names of the people I let die. Thomas Morrison, Sarah Morrison, little Emily Morrison, age 6, David Morrison, age 8, Michael Morrison, age 10. I knew their names because I looked them up later. I went to their funerals and sat in the back row where nobody could see me crying. That's why I came here, to get away from the water, to get away from the voices. But the voices followed me. 2 weeks ago, I was walking through the forest when I heard something that made my blood freeze. It was the sound of children calling for help. The same voices I heard that night in the hurricane, but there were no children in the forest. No water anywhere around. The voices were coming from the dead cattle. I know how that sounds. I know it doesn't make sense. But I swear on my mother's grave, those blood-drained cows were making the sounds of drowning children. I ran home and drank half a bottle of rum, but I could still hear them. The next morning, I went back to where Joe Miller found his cattle. The bodies were gone, but the smell was still there. That chemical smell mixed with something else, something that reminded me of ocean water and fear, and the taste of salt on your lips when you're crying. I found something else there too. Footprints. In the sand. But they weren't human footprints. They looked like hooves, big ones, like from a horse. But the back feet had claws instead of hooves. Long claws that dug deep into the sand. The footprints made a circle around where the cattle had been. A perfect circle, like something had been dancing around the dead animals. I followed the tracks for about a mile before they just stopped. Not like the creature had walked away. They just ended, like whatever made them had flown straight up into the air. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about those Morrison children and about the hoof prints and about the way the trees lean away from certain spots in the forest. Around 3 a.m, I heard something outside my cabin, singing. It was a woman's voice, sweet and sad, singing a lullaby I'd never heard before. The words weren't in English. They sounded older, like they came from somewhere else. Somewhere that existed before this place had a name. I looked out my window, but didn't see anyone, just the forest, dark and quiet, except for that beautiful, terrible singing. The song was coming from the direction of the dead cattle. I grabbed my flashlight and my Coast Guard emergency flare. I don't know why I took the flare. It just felt heavier than usual in my hand, like it knew something important was about to happen. I followed the singing deeper into the forest than I'd ever been before. The trees were older here, thicker, and they cast shadows that moved wrong. In my flashlight beam, the singing got louder as I walked, but it never seemed to get closer. It was always just ahead of me, just around the next bend in the path. That's when I found the clearing. It was perfectly round, about 50 feet across. No trees grew inside it, just bare sand that looked black in my flashlight. And in the center of the clearing was a pile of bones. Not cattle bones. These were older, much older. The singing stopped the moment I stepped into the clearing. And that's when I heard something else. Something breathing, deep and slow, like a huge animal sleeping. But there was nothing there. Just me and the bones and the smell of sulfur getting stronger every second. I should have run. Every smart part of my brain was screaming at me to get out of there and never come back. But I stayed, because for the first time since Hurricane Donna, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, like something had been waiting for me to find this place, something that knew about the Morrison family, something that knew about my cowardice and my guilt and my need to make things right. I could feel it watching me from somewhere I couldn't see, patient, judging, waiting to see what I would do next. The next morning, I drove to the county office in town. I told myself I was just curious about the history of the land where I found those bones. But deep down, I knew I was looking for answers about what was happening to me. The clerk was a friendly older woman named Mrs. Patterson. She had gray hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. "I'm looking for information about the Pine Barrens," I told her, "the area about 5 miles east of my cabin." Her smile disappeared. "Oh, honey, you don't want to go poking around in those old records. Some things are better left alone." But I pressed her. I said I was writing a book about local history, which wasn't exactly a lie. I was trying to write the story of what was happening to me, even if I didn't understand it yet. She sighed and led me to a dusty room full of filing cabinets. "These go back to when this was all native land," she said, "before the settlers came. But I'm warning you, there's some ugly stuff in here." I spent 6 hours reading through old papers and maps. What I found made my stomach turn. The land where I found the bones used to be a sacred burial ground. The Lenape people, the native tribe that lived here first, buried their dead there for hundreds of years. The bones I found weren't from animals. They were from people who died long before America was even a country. But that wasn't the worst part. Starting in 1945, right after World War II ended, the government began dumping chemical waste on that same land. Barrels of leftover poison from making weapons. Stuff so dangerous they couldn't figure out how to get rid of it safely, so they just buried it where they thought nobody would look. On top of a sacred cemetery, the papers showed truck after truck driving into the Pine Barrens at night, carrying barrels marked with skull and crossbones. The drivers were told to dig holes and bury everything deep, then never talk about it to anyone. But the chemicals leaked. They always leak, eventually. The groundwater got poisoned. The streams that fed into the area turned colors that water isn't supposed to be. Animals started dying in strange ways. Not from disease, but like something was sucking the life right out of them. And that's when the attack started. The first report was from 1947. A truck driver working the night shift said something with wings and hooves attacked his truck, tore the roof clean off and left claw marks on the metal that looked like they came from an animal the size of a horse. More reports came in over the years, always at night, always near the dumping sites. Something big and angry that could fly and had eyes like fire. The government tried to cover it up. They paid people to stay quiet. They told newspapers it was just mass hallucinations caused by swamp gas. But I found the real reports, the ones they tried to hide. Contractors who got sick from handling the chemical barrels, workers who saw things they couldn't explain, and families, entire families, who disappeared after asking too many questions about what was being buried in their woods. One report made my hands shake as I read it. It was from 1959, a year before Hurricane Donna. A government scientist named Dr. Elizabeth Reed had been studying the chemical contamination. She found that the poison was following underground water paths that connected all the old native sacred sites. Like someone had drawn invisible lines across the forest, and the chemicals were following those lines exactly. Dr. Reed wrote that the contamination was awakening something that should have stayed asleep. She recommended stopping all dumping operations immediately. Her report was dated October 15th, 1959. She disappeared October 16th. I sat there in that dusty room, reading page after page of cover-ups and lies and people who vanished when they got too close to the truth. And then I found something that made everything click into place. It was a copy of an old Lenape story, translated into English by a missionary in 1742. The story talked about a guardian spirit that protected sacred lands from those who would harm them. The spirit had the body of a horse, the wings of a bat, and eyes that could see into a person's soul. It would judge people based on their actions, especially how they treated the earth and the things that lived on it. If someone was innocent, the spirit would leave them alone. If someone was guilty of harming the land or its people, the spirit would punish them. But if someone was trying to make up for past wrongs, if they were truly sorry and willing to sacrifice themselves to protect others, the spirit might offer them a chance at redemption. I read that story 3 times before I understood what it meant. The thing in the forest wasn't just some random monster. It was a judge. It was deciding who deserved to live and who deserved to die based on what they had done to this place. And it had been waiting for me. I drove home as the sun was setting. The forest looked different now that I knew its secrets. Every tree seemed to be watching me. Every shadow seemed to hide something with glowing eyes. That night, I heard the hoof steps for the first time. They started around midnight, slow, heavy steps circling my cabin, not trying to hide or sneak up on me, just letting me know it was there. I looked out my window, but saw nothing except darkness. The steps went around my cabin 7 times, then stopped at my front door. I could hear breathing on the other side, Deep, patient breathing like something was waiting for me to come out. But I wasn't ready, not yet. I still had too many questions. So I waited until morning, then drove back to town. I needed to find someone who knew more about the Lenape stories. Someone who could tell me what the guardian spirit really wanted. I found her at the library. Her name was Mary Crow Feather, and she was the last member of the local Lenape tribe still living in the area. She was in her 70s, with silver, hair braided down her back, and eyes that seemed to see right through me. "You're the one living out by the old burial ground," she said before I even introduced myself. I nodded. "It knows you're there," she said. "It's been waiting for someone like you for a long time." Someone like me? Someone with blood on their hands who wants to wash it clean. I told her about Hurricane Donna, about the Morrison family, about the guilt that followed me everywhere I went. She listened without saying a word, then was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "The guardian judges based on 3 things," she said. "What you've done wrong, what you're willing to do to make it right, and whether your heart is truly changed. What happens if I pass the test? Then you get to help it protect this place from those who would destroy it. And if I fail," she looked at me with those ancient eyes, "then you join the others who failed. Your bones go in that clearing, and your spirit helps power the guardian." For the next judgment, I left the library with more answers than I'd had before, but also with more fear, because now I knew what was coming. The guardian spirit was going to test me, and depending on how that test went, I was either going to find the redemption I'd been looking for, or I was going to die in those dark woods. Either way, the waiting was almost over. 3 nights later, it came for me. I was sitting on my porch, drinking coffee and watching the stars. The forest was quiet, except for the usual night sounds, crickets, wind through the pine, trees, an owl hooting somewhere far away. Then everything went silent, not just quiet, silent, like someone had turned off all the sound in the world. The air got thick and heavy, like before a thunderstorm. My coffee cup started shaking in my hands, even though I wasn't moving. That's when I saw it. It came out of the sky like a shadow with wings. At first I thought it was just a really big bird, but as it got closer, I could see it was something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist. The wings were huge, maybe 15 feet from tip to tip. They looked like bat wings, but made of leather that seemed to glow in the moonlight. The body was like a horse, but wrong somehow. Too long, too thin, covered in dark fur that moved like it was alive. The head was the worst part. It had a horse's head, but with a mouth full of teeth like a wolf. Sharp, white teeth that caught. The light when it opened its mouth. And the eyes burned like someone had lit fires inside its skull. It landed about 20 feet from my porch, and the ground shook when its hooves hit the dirt. I could see now that the back feet weren't hooves at all. They were claws, long and curved, like an eagle's talons, but bigger than my whole hand. The tail was like a snake, thick and muscular, ending in something that looked like a spear point. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few seconds. Then it spoke, not with its mouth. The voice came from inside my head, but I could hear it as clearly as if someone was standing right next to me. The words were in English, but they sounded old, like they came from a time when people talked differently. "William Foster," it said, "you have been called to judgment." My mouth was so dry I could barely talk. "I know. You carry the weight of 5 souls who died because of your fear. Yes. You have come to sacred ground, poisoned by those who care nothing for the earth or its children." I nodded. The creature's eyes burned brighter. "Do you know why you are here?" "To be judged," I said. "To choose," it corrected me. "The judgment is yours to make." It moved closer, and I could smell it now, not the sulfur smell I'd been smelling in the forest. This was different. It smelled like rain and old earth and something clean that I couldn't name. "The poisoners are returning tomorrow night," it said. "They bring more death to bury in sacred soil. You can stop them, but it will cost you everything you have left." "What do you mean?" The creature spread its wings wider. "I am not strong enough to fight them alone. The poison has weakened me over the years. I need someone to help me destroy their operation once and for all." "How?" "Fire," it said simply. "Your emergency flare can ignite their chemicals. The explosion will destroy everything they have brought, but you will not survive it." I felt my hand go to the flare on my belt. I'd been carrying it everywhere since that first night in the forest, without really knowing why. "If I do this," I said, "what happens to the people I let die? The Morrison family?" The creature's eyes softened just a little. "Their spirits will be at peace. Your sacrifice will balance the scales. And if I don't, then more will die. The poisoners will continue their work. The land will sicken further. And you will live with the knowledge that you chose your own life over others, just as you did in the storm." I thought about Thomas Morrison waving at me from his sinking boat, about his wife trying to hold their children above the water, about 6-year-old Emily looking at me with trust in her eyes right before she disappeared under the waves. I thought about the sacred bones buried under barrels of poison, about Dr. Elizabeth Reed, who tried to stop this and vanished, about all the animals that had died slow, painful deaths because of the chemicals in their water. "There's something else," the creature said. "If you help me, if you prove your heart has truly changed, you will become something more than human. A guardian like me, but different." "Different how?" "You will be able to find other places like this, other sacred grounds that need protection, other poisoners who need to be stopped. But each battle will bring you closer to a final judgment that even I cannot see." I stood up from my chair. My legs felt shaky, but I managed to stay upright. "What's your name?" I asked. The creature tilted its great head. "I have been called many things, devil, monster, demon, but my true name is older than those words. I am the one who remembers what this land was before it was broken." "Will it hurt? The fire?" "Yes," it said honestly, "but not for long. And when it's over, you will understand things that you cannot understand now." I looked at my little cabin, at the forest around it, at the stars that had spelled out accusations against me just a few nights ago. Then I looked at the creature, the guardian, that had been waiting for someone like me to come along, someone with enough guilt to be willing to pay the price for redemption. "When do we do this?" I asked. The creature's mouth opened in what might have been a smile, if monsters could smile. "Tomorrow night," it said, "when the moon is dark and the poisoners think they cannot be seen. Will you stay with me until then?" "I will watch over you," it promised. "You will not face this alone." The creature spread its wings and leaped into the air. But instead of flying away, it circled my cabin 3 times, then settled on the roof of my house like a giant, impossible bird. I could hear it up there all night, not moving around, just breathing, slow and steady, like it was sleeping, but also like it was standing guard. For the first time since Hurricane Donna, I slept without nightmares. When I woke up in the morning, the creature was gone, but I could still feel it watching me from somewhere nearby. And I knew that tonight, one way or another, everything would be finished. The Morrison family would finally get their justice. The sacred land would finally get its revenge. And I would finally get my chance to do the right thing, even if it killed me.